Hi and welcome. It's Jenna from McGuire and I hope you're having a great week. Today I have 7 ways to use coordinating dies creatively. So coordinating dies are the dies that match stamp sets, and it is an investment to get these for stamp sets, so I thought I would share with you 7 creative ways to use them to kind of get more bang for your buck. Now these are subtle little things that I did with tiny images today, but I made a bunch of examples and I'm hoping that you'll learn a few things along the way. Now before we get into the techniques, I just want to pull everything together and get ready. I will be using several stamp sets today, but mostly this new Mama Elephant Little Girl Agenda stamp set. I also have the coordinating dies that go with this, and you'll see me use the Boy Agenda set also. Now, sometimes when you have a bunch of coordinating dies like this, it's hard to figure out which ones cut out which images. So a trick that I do is I number each of the stamp images with a permanent pen right onto the stamp set. And then I find the coordinating die and I write that number on the back of the die. It's kind of small and it might wear off over time, but I find that it stays on there long enough that I can easily figure out which ones match. This will save me a lot of time. Now I'll keep all these dies on that piece of magnetic paper in the back of my stamp sleeve. Now when you're cutting up your dies, they come connected because of manufacturing purposes, but when you cut them you want to use wire snips and make sure you cut off those little pointy pieces. To do that, what I do is I do it into a baby wipe, because if you don't do it into a baby wipe, that little piece of metal can go flying and it's very sharp. This way I can be sure that it's safely kept in there and I can throw it away without any worries. So here you can see a peek at the Little Boy Agenda stamp set. It's much like the little girl, lots of images that are playful with doing different things. And there is a cat set and a dog set. So you can check all of these out. They're all smaller, so the coordinating dies are very handy. I'm also using this frame from the Mama Elephant Favor Bag die set. I like that it had scallop and faux stitching because I'm keeping these cards very simple. Now for this first example, I'm using the Mama Elephant I Like You stamp set. There's a message here that says, I love you and naps, and I thought that was fun. I'm going to use a variety of sentiments, but this is the first one for the first example. Now I did most of my stamping in my Misty stamping tool today, simply because I wanted to double stamp it so it would be nice and black. I chose a Copic friendly ink to do this because I wanted to do fast coloring with my Copic markers, but you can do anything you want. Now I also wanted to mention that I did alter some of the stamp images along the way, just to give them a different look. For example, this little girl here, I actually stamped a tiny little heart and put it in her hand, just for something different. So I encourage you to try that too. Now the coloring I did was not fancy. I just thought I would mention that what I did is stamped a bunch of things and I colored all the skin, then I colored all the hair, then all the dresses, and that saves me a ton of time. So I was able to make a bunch of cards today simply because I did the coloring all together at once. So let's dive into the techniques now that we're all ready. I am starting with creating an impression with your die. So you can take a stamp image and then use the coordinating dies to make an impressed line around it. I've done this in a video in the past and I'll link to it here. So you can see that faint little line right around the little girl. It's hard to see in videos, but in real life, it does give nice definition to the image. To do this, you need to set up your die cut machine as you would an embossing folder. For me, I'm using the Big Shot Express, so I go to tab 1. I put down my cutting plate and then a tan embossing pad. This embossing pad allows you to make impressions onto paper with your dies and other things, which I'll show you later in this video. If you don't have this embossing pad, I highly recommend getting one. Now I'm going to take a piece of tape and kind of stick it all over my fingers so it loses some of its stick. Then I'm going to take the coordinating die and tape it temporarily into place. Now I'll leave that on the embossing pad and put the cutting plate on top and run it through my machine. Once I remove the die, I'll have an impression of that cut line. Because we used the embossing pad, it didn't cut, but instead made an impression. And it gives nice definition around our stamped image. This is a great way to use your coordinating dies for any stamp sets you may have. Now the second idea for using coordinating dies creatively is to dry emboss with them. So really it's the opposite of what we just did. Instead of impressing into it, we're going to raise it up. This almost gives the look of a puffy sticker to our stamped image. So I started by die cutting my frame, stamping and coloring the images, and then also adding a stamp sentiment from this Mama Elephant Happy Mail stamp set. The greeting says, "Sending happiness your way," and I thought this works for a variety of occasions. Next, I'm taking some extras of the coordinating die cuts and gluing them together. I'm going to stack these up 4 high, so I end up with a coordinating chipboard piece, almost like a chipboard piece, because this is going to be extra thick. So I'm going to use this as a tool to make my dry embossing. Now I'm taking the negative die cut space and using it to help me line this up. Now I actually need to line this up on the back of the stamped image. So what I'm going to do is flip it over and use my flashlight to shine through. I want to line up that negative space around the stamped image that's on the front. You could also just hold it up to a light to line it up perfectly. Once I have it lined up, I'm going to hold it there. Then I'm going to take that stacked die cut piece that we just created and pop it right in place. Then carefully remove the negative space. I was just using that to help me position. And then I'm going to temporarily tape that stacked die cut piece to the back. And now that stacked die cut piece is positioned perfectly behind our stamped image. Now I'm going to take this and put this face down onto an embossing pad and run it through. And this basically presses that stacked die cut onto the back of that stamped image, causing it to kind of rise up and look like a puffy sticker. And by the way, I put a piece of typing paper below it so that I didn't damage my coloring. So there is a second way to use your coordinating dies. A third way to use your coordinating dies is very simple, and this is to inset your stamped image, or basically have your stamped image behind the die cut window. This gives you a fun twist on dimension. To do this is very easy. I stamped a little girl and a message on a die cut frame. Now I'm using the coordinating die to die cut her out. And then I will save that little girl for a future card. Instead, I'm going to color some little girls that I stamped on other pieces of white cardstock, and I'm doing a bunch at once. I decided to stamp a heart on the sign that she's holding and turn that sign into a little envelope. So I stamped a heart and drew 2 lines, so instead it looks like an envelope. It's fun to change images that way. So now I have some double-sided tape I'm putting on the back of the frame that we die cut, and I'll line the stamped image up behind it. This gives us the fun look of dimension with her kind of inset behind it. It would be really fun to do an entire background like this. Okay, the fourth way to use your dies creatively is to give some solid dimension. This one's pretty simple, pretty obvious, but I thought I'd throw it out there anyways. Instead of just adhering a die cut with foam tape, I like to stack a bunch of die cuts behind it so it is solid dimension. So if you look from the side, it looks like a full embellishment. So I've colored and die cut a bunch of little images here, and I die cut some extra shapes. And I'm going to stack them up 5 high. So I have the colored die cut on the top and 4 behind it. Then I'll glue that onto my frame piece, and it gives this nice solid dimension that looks so much better than just sticking a couple foam dots behind it. Highly recommend doing this. It's definitely worth the little bit of extra time. And by the way, I covered all of these colored images with some Spectrum Noir shimmer pen just to give it some extra shine. And by the way, that sentiment is from a really old Mama Elephant stamp set called Sunny Skies. And check it out. On the right, I stamped one of the dogs and gave them some spots with my Copic markers. This next idea is another easy one, and that is to use an action wobbler. If you have a stamped image and can quickly cut it out with your die cut, then all you have to do is put a little action wobbler behind it, and it pops up beautifully when somebody takes the card out of the envelope. Now these little action wobblers are little springs that have a mount on the top, on both sides of it, and they pop up, and it's nice because it flattens nicely for the mail. Well, I noticed that this little mini action wobbler was still too big for that little doggy that I have, so I'm actually trimming some of the extra plastic off, both the top and the bottom. And I was able to trim enough down that he fit behind the little doggy, but still had enough to glue it in place. So don't be afraid to trim the action wobblers down to fit a small die cut. And there I'm just going to pop him onto a frame, and check it out. He pops up huge, he shakes a lot, but when you push him down and put him in an envelope, he flattens nicely. These action wobblers are definitely worth it. And I do put some extra adhesive on them just to make sure that they stay put. Be sure to let that dry before you press it down though, because you don't want to glue it down. Okay, so that's another really fast way to use your little die cuts. By the way, if you don't have action wobblers, I'll link to a video on how you can create your own here. Another great way to use your images that are cut with coordinating dies is to combine them together. I often forget to do this, but if you have the coordinating dies, you can quickly cut them out and put them together to create something new, as I did with the laptop with the little girl in the screen. I thought that sentiment was perfect for it. So I have this image from Blogging Buddy's stamp set from Mama Elephant, and I'm going to use my craft knife to cut out the screen. This was easy to do since it's a basic rectangle. I am then using my black pen to kind of color in any white still showing after I cut that out, since I didn't do the best job, but nobody will ever know. Then I'm using the coordinating die to go ahead and die cut this, so it really didn't take long at all. I also colored and die cut a little girl, and I'm going to glue her on the back of the laptop so she shows through the screen. I will then trim the extra off that's hanging out the top and use my anti-static powder tool to kind of cover up any of the adhesive that's still showing on the back. Now the sentiment I used with this is from that same Blogging Buddies Mama Elephant stamp set. Really fun images. So look at all your stamps and coordinating dies and think of how you can combine them together creatively to come up with a new image. Okay, so our 7th idea for using coordinating dies creatively is for masking. This is great, especially if you want to create a one-layer card, because you can use your coordinating die to quickly create a mask for a stamped image. The neat thing is it leaves a little white halo around your image, so it keeps it nice and clean. To do this, I like to die cut Post-it notes that have sticky on the entire back side. I actually kept 4 Post-it notes together and die cut them all at once so that I would quickly have 4 little masks ready to go. Now I'm using the negative space to line up around the stamped image, and I can pop my little mask in place, then remove the negative space, and now I know that my mask is perfectly positioned over my stamped image. Now I'm just going to stamp this sentiment repeatedly over it in a pool colored ink. This sentiment is from the Mama Elephant Hello Friend stamp set. And when I remove my mask, I have a perfectly clean image with the sentiments around it. Here's another way to use a mask. Again, I'm using the negative space to help me line up the mask so it's positioned perfectly. And now I'm going to lightly use an ink blending tool to apply just like a little cloud of blue around her. I start very light and build it up because I don't want to have any harsh lines. Once I'm done, I can remove my mask and I have a little white halo around her, and then we have the blue ink around that. So I added some coloring to that, stamped Miss You into the little sign, and it was ready to go. I think that Miss You one with the sentiment stamped repeatedly is my favorite. Now before I move on to a bonus card for you today, I just wanted to mention how I pulled these together into a card. Each of the frames is on a card that I created that's smaller. It's about 4 1/4 tall and about 3 1/4 wide. It's just what fit behind that frame nicely. And I will put these into a smaller envelope that's about 3 1/2 by 5. I thought that worked perfectly. Now for the bonus card, I just wanted to use some of the extra images that I colored because I went a little crazy and put them all together in a fun card. I think there's nothing more impactful than putting all these little girls together. So I used a new die from Mama Elephant that's the perfect grid for these little images, or any little images you may have. So it die cuts a piece that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I use foam tape to glue that onto a card. It also has faux stitching around the edge, which I really like. I then colored and die cut a bunch of the little girls, added some shimmer to them, and used foam tape to put them in each of the little windows. The sentiment that says "with lots of love" is from this older Mama Elephant mini messages stamp set. Just thought this was a fun way to use these cute images. So there you have a bunch of ways to use your stamps with coordinating dies. Those coordinating dies sure can be handy, and you can see I made quite a few cards today. If you want to see images of all of these, be sure to head over to my blog. I'll have photos there for you. I appreciate you watching. If you're interested in the supplies I use, they are linked below in my YouTube description, but again, go to my blog for more info. In the middle are some other videos you might like, and I hope you return again soon. Have a great day.